So I've always had this idea for a Pokemon themed short film in Blender that goes like... And I knew making the CGI environment around it all would be easy enough. What would not be easy though would be making the Pokemons. And I don't know how to sculpt or even 3D model at that level, but what I do know is photogrammetry. Let's get straight into it. Now, a few weeks ago, I made an introductory video on this channel regarding photo scanning, targeting beginners who want to get started with photo scanning with just their smartphones. But in this video, with the help of our sponsors Qt Engine, I wanted to dig a little deeper, explore the best ways to photo scan a small to medium sized object. And see, I've been obsessed with Pokemons for a while now, and this idea of placing them in their synonymous CGI environments had been simmering in my head for a few months now. So I went online looking for some cheap Pokemon action figurines, almost like a child who suddenly got access to adult money and ordered a bunch of my favorite Gen 1 Pokemons from various websites so I could photo scan them. And this time around, I think I tried everything. I tried scanning with my cheap smartphone, I tried scanning with an expensive smartphone, I tried scanning with a DSLR with a polarizer, I tried scanning indoors and outdoors, in sunny weather or rainy weather. I tried using an expensive diffuse light, I tried a cheap ring light, I even used the flash on my phone to scan some things. And not just that, I tried revolving around the object or rotating the object itself. And then I even tried different surfaces, like I tried scanning on wooden surfaces, on yoga mats. I even tried hanging objects on wires or dangling them off a fan so I could get their bottom part simultaneously. Then I tried some post-processing techniques, I tried AI upscaling, I tried shooting in RAW format in HDR mode. I even tried the portrait mode on my camera. I tried different camera apps altogether. I tried the proprietary featureless object scan mode too that Qt Engine provides that uses neural surface reconstruction algorithms for featureless objects. Actually, I used them quite extensively for this project, and that alone could be the reason for watching this whole video in my opinion. But to just sum it all up, I generated over 100 3D photo scan models with the help of Qt Engine and put a lot of effort into it all and came across results that might surprise you, especially the beginners. So stick to the end and I'll try and summarize everything for you in a consumable, short and sweet format. So let's begin. Actually, before we begin, if you like the style of my renders and you like the short films that I make, the blend file breakdown tutorials and the relevant source files are available to download on the Patreon and also on YouTube members now. So join in if you're interested. For now, let's get to it and begin with the most obvious parameter, which is the device. And obviously, a DSLR is the best choice of device when photo scanning. And obviously, an expensive Samsung Galaxy S23 is better than a cheap Xiaomi smartphone. But what's surprising is when you put them side to side in the viewport, you won't notice much of a difference if you look at them from a reasonable distance. And actually, while photo scanning these Pokemons, which are not bigger than 5 to 6 centimeters, I realized the DSLR was actually lacking in most cases, even with a wide lens. Maybe because of the depth of field, maybe because of the focal length. I observed both the smartphone cameras performed better than the DSLR. Even after post-processing and sharpening the images up a little bit, I felt like DSLRs were only great for medium-sized, highly detailed objects. And smartphones are a better choice for something smaller like this, because they have a smaller lens module, obviously, and that allows them to take better, clearer photographs from up close for something this small. And this is also why I recommend an application like Qt Engine. It has a very low barrier of entry, and all you need is a smartphone, really. Probably the smartphone you're using to watch this video, even. And since the free plan has almost all the basics features open to all the users, you won't even need to pay a single penny to just get started. But anyway, let's keep going. Before I move on to location-based parameters, I wanted to talk about polarizers. I bought a polarizer on Amazon.in for approximately 1600 rupees or $24 on Amazon.com, and I found out two things. Polarizers are great for objects that are not too matte and not too reflective either. Something like this that has enough feature points but can also be shiny at different angles. A polarizer blocks those lights and gives a really neat final result. But on something like a plastic Pokemon action figure where reflections are anyway minimal, polarizers on your DSLR or even your light sources, as you sometimes see a lot of professional photogrammers use, are overkill in my opinion. If you're not planning to do this professionally and you are not a perfectionist, I do not recommend using polarizers, especially to hobbyists and entry-level photogrammers. By the way, in case you didn't know, polarizers for smartphones exist as well, in case you wanted to go extreme overkill mode. I didn't, but if you do or have used them before in the past, I would love to know how they worked out for you. But yeah, anyway, moving on. The next big parameter according to me is the location, inside versus outside. And again, the DSLR as expected more or less performs great in both environments. Smartphones tend to do a little better in the outdoors, especially a cheap smartphone like my Redmi Note 10 Pro because it gets ample of lighting from all directions when outside. But again, the difference is minimal if you have sufficient lighting indoors too. And before we go deeper into the indoor lighting setups, I wanted to compare a sunny day with an overcast day and tell you which one you should prefer for photo scanning. And what I observed is on an overcast day, the results are usually more consistent. The generated models look evenly lit, but a sunny day usually gives a sharper end result but can be inconsistent if you don't place yourself appropriately in the environment. It is usually advised to stay behind a long shadow like behind a building or something when scanning on a sunny day, but all in all, an overcast day should be your preference, but a sunny day is in no way a good enough reason to not go outside and scan something. Actually, again, my cheap smartphone gave better results on a sunny day because again, more lighting, clearer pictures, and hence a better scanned model. But yeah, this was all about the outdoors. Let's talk about the indoors now, which I think is the preference for most people. And I tried 3 kinds of indoor lighting setups. First was inside my living room with some ceiling lights and some LED bulbs spread around. Second setup was in my friend's studio where I had access to a soft diffuse light source along with some other LED bulbs. And the third option was a super cheap ring light that I used with all the lights turned off in my living room. And again, the DSLR and the expensive Samsung phone do well in all instances, but my cheap Xiaomi smartphone does exceptionally well with just one ring light in complete darkness. And the ring light has this nice phone holder thing too that can come in really handy when revolving around an object. And if you have a power bank, you don't even need to worry about the mobility anymore. It's great. So if you can invest in a cheap ring light, please do because the results will definitely surprise you. For instance, just try and turn off all the lights in your room and just use the flash on your smartphone and try and scan something. A ring light will produce a similar effect, only much better. It's a very viable option if you ask me, better than the living room lights and the studio lights in a lot of cases for me in this project. So definitely give it a try. Another surprising parameter that came out while using the ring light was, is it better to revolve around the object or is it better to rotate the object itself while the camera is mounted steady? And again, I was surprised to find out that it is so much easier and better to keep the camera steady and just rotate the object if you can. All you have to do is keep the background and everything else around the subject black enough so that the isolation of the subject is nice and clear. You can use black bed sheets or curtains or t-shirts lying around in your house to cover everything. A platform like this with handmade icons helps out a lot too, and now every software handles markers like these differently. But Kitty Engine had no trouble tracking these handmade icons. In fact, it preferred these markers in most cases in my observation, and this is also the reason why I think I found using a wooden base beneath the subject helps out a lot too, since the algorithm gets so many tracking points naturally from a diffuse surface like wood in comparison to a featureless surface like a yoga mat or a plastic container. So side note, you gotta pay attention to the base of the subject too. That can make or break your photo scan sometimes. But yeah, getting back to the point, revolving around the object is not a bad option either. Let me get that straight before anything else. In fact, in most cases, I would recommend you try both these methods and see what yields you better results. But one distinct disadvantage of revolving around an object is it is physically exhausting, especially if you don't have the subject planted at a good enough height. Half your energy will be spent in ducking at weird angles and taking awkward photos, as a result of which you could first of all injure yourself, like I did the last time. I injured my lower back while scanning like a crazy person. But what's worse is you will get lumpy, low quality photo scans just because you were taking low quality pictures at awkward, uncomfortable angles. And that's why keeping the camera steady while you only rotate the object seems like a better option to me. Everything is so much easier to maneuver, given you have a tripod stand, by the way, or a ring light like this with a phone holder. That's another great investment I think you can make when photo scanning, a tripod. But again, Amazon boxes, books and containers and tables and stands are great DIY options that you can find around yourself if you don't have the means to buy a tripod right now. But yeah, I think that's all about the location and the device. Let's now specifically talk about smartphone settings. If your smartphone offers a pro mode in the camera application, definitely opt for that. If it offers a higher megapixel mode too, or an HDR mode even, like my phone has the 64 megapixel option, you should enable that too, just to get the best possible pictures. But to be honest, these 64 megapixel modes or enabling the HDR mode in your camera or taking raw pictures or using different camera applications like the Google camera instead of your default camera app, all these gimmicks make little to no difference if you don't take clean, consistent photos. Yes, you should enable the Pro mode no matter what, but all these extra modes may or may not yield relatively better results. At least in my case they didn't, so try them out because every smartphone is built differently, but nothing is more paramount than taking consistent, clear pictures. Another important parameter, I think, is getting the bottom part of the object right. Now, KiRi has this really handy auto object masking feature that allows you to flip the object then and there and take the photos of the bottom part. And then KiRi will magically stitch it all together in post to make a perfect 360-degree model. This, although, can be a little fidgety sometimes if you don't take the pictures properly, or if the subject itself has no recognizable feature points visible in both straight and flipped states. So instead of flipping the object, I tried hanging the subjects with a thread, even balancing them on really thin surfaces like needles or toothpicks or malleable metal wires, even metal screws for one instance, so I could get under the subject simultaneously when scanning them. And I think I did something wrong here because I think the algorithm always failed to generate a good enough model for me. I don't know if it was me or my phone or the algorithm, I just couldn't figure it out. It seemed like the algorithm preferred a surface beneath the subject and it would rather have you flip it on a surface rather than go under it. So I just want to know if I did something wrong here or not. It seemed like a smart idea, but nothing really came out of it, sadly. So experienced photogrammers watching this, let me know in the comments below what I could be doing wrong here. I'd really appreciate that. Meanwhile, I'm just happy to flip the object around and let KiRi do all the hard work for me. Another crazy feature KiRi offers is the PBR texture generator. It gives you a normal map, a roughness map, and even a displacement map if you enable this checkmark while exporting. And I use the normal map extensively just to fake some extra details that weren't captured naturally when scanning. Another thing that I often tend to do to fake extra details in my models is use this post-processing section within the KiRi interface. I use this sharpening slider on every model that I export, sometimes even twice, to get an even more detailed output. It's a really handy feature, and there's extra options available here too if you want to meddle with the texture before exporting your model. Another awesome feature they provide while exporting is the quad remeshing option that generates amazing topology for your photo scan before it gets delivered to your email address. I also love that none of the processing happens locally, so you can literally open up multiple tabs and upload multiple photo scans and videos simultaneously and go grab a snack and come back to a myriad of finished photo scan results. And see, the free plan is accessible, the paid plan is affordable, and the app is available on both Android and iOS, and they have an amazing web interface too if using smartphones isn't your cup of tea. And we have talked a lot about photo scans at this point, but let's now explore my favorite feature that KiRi provides, which is the featureless object scan mode. And a lot of people, including myself, confuse this mode with NURFs, but NURFs don't allow you to generate 3D meshes. But this proprietary technology that KiRi uses is called Neural Surface Reconstruction, or NSR, which actually generates usable 3D meshes for your featureless objects. And I'm sure you'll agree, all these tricky, confusing technical terms don't mean anything if they don't produce usable results. So you'd be shocked to know that 8 out of the 10 Pokemons I used in this short film were generated using the featureless object scan mode. And I'm sure you must be wondering why too, because photo scans obviously must yield better results than whatever this featureless object scan mode can do, right? To you, I would say hold on a second, because that's what I thought as well. But there's a reason why this whole second half of the video is deviating from the subject of photo scanning and is completely dedicated to just this featureless object scan mode. So let me elaborate. Now, I'm fairly new to photo scanning myself too, and when I look at a Pokemon like Charmander and Squirtle here, I think it has a ton of feature points, and traditional photo scanning algorithms will have a field day with easy subjects like these. But I was totally wrong, because you see this Charmander has a lot of feature points up front and a little bit on the back too, but the back of his head to a photo scanning algorithm is just a uniform orange plane with no distinguishable features. So it scans the rest of the body pretty well, but at the back of his head, the algorithm falls apart. Same with the Squirtle. The whole body scans great, but the back of his head is unusable. Now, there are ways to remedy that. You could use scanning spray, which is inaccessible in my country, but I've heard it's great to cover up reflective surfaces and add some detail to featureless areas. But if you don't have access to that, you could use talcum powder or wheat flour and sprinkle that on your subject a little bit, and that can help sometimes. Even putting simple icons and markers on difficult areas of the model, like I've done here on the Squirtle, can yield a good enough result. Or using tape markers if you don't want to ruin your action figure. But that would add an extra step in the post-processing stage where you would have to clone stamp your graffiti out of the models, which by the way you can't even do with the powder/flour method at all. Those features will probably be baked into your final model, which is not ideal at all. So usually I wouldn't prefer taking the traditional photo scanning path with objects like these. I think this featureless object scan mode is the way to go here. And this mode is great because for one, you don't need to take pictures. All you need is a 2-minute video of you revolving around your object, and that's it. But 2, you get flawless featureless scans with no extra gimmicks like before. And you get beautiful background masking here, and the models even fill up texture gaps themselves in CreateEngine sometimes, which is crazy. And we can keep the Pokemons aside for a second too, and take a completely realistic real-world object into consideration, like a really reflective statue like this, or a ceramic spoon stand like this, or a glass sculpture even. Subjects that would make any traditional photo scanning algorithm throw up. But this featureless scan mode for sure will shock you with the results it can generate. And I don't think the argument will anymore be about which method is better for a subject like this. Traditional photo scanning algorithms will just fail to generate a decent enough model here. So it's either you give up a subject like this, or you give CreateEngine a try. If for nothing else, I think their featureless object scan mode alone is worth a download, in my opinion. So if you do end up giving it a try, there are optimal ways you can approach this mode as well. Like if your device has optimal image stabilization like the Samsung S23 I was using does, you get much cleaner, much refined results as compared to my cheap Xiaomi smartphone that has no hardware level stabilization whatsoever. It does have a software level stabilization where it just crops into the footage to reduce shakiness, but that is hit and miss in most cases and not reliable at all. And DSLRs, again, are obviously great at this too, but again for my use case where the subjects were so small in size that the DSLRs had too much bokeh and too little detail, that the results were always better on the smartphones. And yeah, also again, outdoors were better than the indoors in most cases with this featureless scan mode too, especially with smartphones. And yeah, even in this featureless object scan mode, this iconized black base helped the algorithm out a lot in most cases. So I suggest you make a DIY platform like this if you can at home using some Amazon boxes and some tape and some permanent markers. I seriously highly recommend that. Now, if you don't have access to the outside and choose to do these indoors, the lighting matters here as well. I tried the same 3 lighting setups as before: living room lights, studio lights, and the ring light with darkness. And in my case, both the living room lights and studio lights worked much better with nerves. The ring light method was not bad either, to be honest with you. But I think this neural surface reconstruction algorithm prefers uniform steady lighting relative to this ring lighting setup that I had going on. And I tried a bunch of stupid things too here, like rotating the object in place with my hands with a black background setup like before, but this time for the featureless scan mode and this time with a video instead. But that was a huge waste of time and effort. I also tried compiling some pictures I took as a photo scan into a 2-minute video in Resolve and uploaded that, thinking I could fool the algorithm into thinking that these pictures were actually part of a video somehow, but even that was a huge waste of time and effort. And in the photo scanning stage one day, I sat down and masked my subject out manually in Photoshop so the algorithm wouldn't have to detect the subject itself, and I would just spoon feed it everything. Even that was a huge waste of time and effort. That scan actually failed in the first attempt, and in the second attempt gave out lumpy, useless results. So in short, I do not recommend doing stupid things like these. Just keep it simple. Just go to a well-lit spot, take good, consistent photos or videos in the case of featureless objects, and that should be more than enough. And yeah, I think that's it. That's all I had to say in this section about the featureless object scan mode. Now just a quick note on post-processing. Yes, sharpening and noise reduction on these photos and videos can help sometimes, especially if your photos seem to lack details or are too noisy. And yes, reducing the highlights and lifting the shadows up can help get a more flat result, but I really didn't see the need for it in most cases because I'm not a perfectionist and can work with the photo scan with some teeny tiny faults here and there. And sharpening is the only thing that I can recommend in the post-processing stage that actually helps in generating a finer looking final model. I tried AI upscaling too, but that again does little to nothing because if you took good pictures, you won't need upscaling. And if you took bad pictures, AI upscalers will just magnify those mistakes. So that was not worth it either in my case. And now to finally summarize everything, after all this chatter, the moral of the story is, for someone just getting started out, a smartphone in a well-lit area is all you're ever gonna need. Once you successfully do that, then you can add extra things like a ring light or a tripod or a platform with markers, or if you have a DSLR, add polarizers or whatnot to your photo scanning workflow. Maybe buy a diffuse lighting rig in the future or invest in a better smartphone in the future. Things like these matter only once you intend to take things to the next level and do this thing seriously or do this thing professionally for a business. But when just starting out, make use of things just lying around in your house. Books, water bottles, Amazon boxes, or whatever you can find in your surrounding. Just start there and then get to the advanced stuff. And now some simple tips that you can follow while photo scanning. One of the tips that made all of this photo scanning process much simpler for me was to place the object at nose height, because that makes the photo taking process a little easier on your body, as I explained before. And also to place the object on a circular platform if you can. That allows you to be consistently distanced from your object when scanning them. What I mean by that is if you place your object on a rectangular table, there are going to be some instances where you would be farther away from the subject when on the longer side of the rectangle, which is not a big deal to be honest. But these little things do add up sometimes when you finally generate your model, so keep them in mind just in case. And yeah, also transparent double-sided tape is another thing that made life so much easier on this project. When you have such small subjects to scan, they constantly fall off the platform and cause all kinds of inconsistencies. So keeping them steady through double-sided tape was a miracle I stumbled across along the way. So just keep a double-sided tape at hand just in case you need it. Now before we finish the video, I did want to mention that I tried taking Gaussian splats too with Kitty Engine, and the results were stunning to say the least. But again, Gaussian splats are still at a nascent stage for real-world usage, but they're still fun to look at and worth mentioning at the least, in my opinion. And lastly, just a tiny disclaimer, only the Pokemons that you saw in the short film were photo scanned by me. Rest of the environment is just regular 3D models and assets I found on Sketchfab. And yeah, also the last Pokeball shot you saw in the short film was not photo scanned at all. It was just a filler shot that I needed to finish the short film. I thought I would just let you know. And yeah, I think that's it. That's all I wanted to say in this video. A lot of effort went into this. So if you liked what you saw, I would appreciate a like and a comment if you got the time for it. And yeah, join the Patreon or YouTube membership if you can. Special thanks to all my current Patreon and YouTube members who make it possible for me to do this full time. So I appreciate your support more than you can imagine. It might just be $5 or $10 for you, but to me, it is a license to freely pursue my passion and make art that I care about. So thank you so much. You have no idea what this support means to me. Anyway, thanks for watching everybody. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.